Hello, folks. This is part 3 in the Researching Your West Virginia Coal Town series. Now, I had originally, as I'd stated earlier in Video Tip 1, posted a lot of these on Facebook, but because of Facebook's video capture limitations, I decided to go on YouTube and greatly expand my video tips. First tip, we talked about how do you even find your West Virginia coal town and all the cautions. Second video, I really went into the very specifics of even driving to your coal town. You've decided, hey, I'm going to go. What's we're going to be careful about. Now, here's this third tip. The third tip are the people you're going to meet. So, again, we're going to start back with the person who's just discovered they've had a long-lost relative in a coal town. They really haven't been to West Virginia very much, or if really at all. They've driven and they've driven and they finally have arrived at their town. And we're going to assume in this instance their town still exists. There are rare, well, not rare, pardon me, not rare at all, instances where your coal town has ceased existing totally. And I'm really sorry. That's hard. But you arrive at your coal town, and on the way you've met people who you've relied on. Total strangers, as I said again. And yeah, I have emphasized the, thanking people who help you, especially when they're total strangers. But you get there, and it's interesting because I've driven with people who know West Virginia very well or live there. I've also met people who've never been to West Virginia, much less a coal town in West Virginia. And there are some interesting questions they ask, and I think that some of the questions, I think if I try to answer them from my perspective, may lead to some fruitful discussion. First question is, how do people live that way? And that question can be really hard to answer because oftentimes when it's asked, it sounds mean. And sometimes it's asked in a mean way. Let's be honest. Little history. Most coal towns, in fact almost all, the residents or miners who lived in them never owned their house. They rented their house. It was a rare thing to even actually own a house. You were literally told where to live. You were told where you were permitted to be. If you had more kids and wanted to move, you had to ask permission to move to another house. This had been, pre-1950s and even into the 50s. So this is a huge, huge deal. And I'm speaking very, general terms. This changed from size of a coal town, et cetera, et cetera. So when you were actually allowed to own a house, that usually meant the coal was gone. And the operation was pretty much insolvent, and they were going to make money any way they could. And what better way to make money than selling a house? And folks bought the houses. And that's their home. And that's where they live. And they're proud of it. I think it's great. So really it's kind of ignorant and hurtful to sit there and tell someone, how do you live that way? That is their home. How would you like it if I drove up to your home and started asking you how you live that way? You probably wouldn't like that very much, would you? It's called manners, decency, and respect. And especially for people who you don't know. And you should show that. Secondly, another observation is that people say, people are just lying around on their porches. And what's going on with that? I'm going to use a really good example of that. One of the people who actually first said that to me, unfortunately, did it in a really clumsy way. We were going along, and they saw this guy just lying on his porch swing, having a beer. It turns out this guy was a roof bolter. And for those of us who know what a roof bolter is, I don't need to go into why he was probably lying down having a beer. But I'll go into it just for the sake of demonstration. A roof bolter is a person who goes into mines that have just been dug in whatever manner necessary. And this lucky soul gets to put up bolts in the rooftop to secure it so that it doesn't do things like collapse on the miners that are there. And they do so in a totally unsupported environment. You're boring holes into a rock ceiling, and you're putting in bolts that expand and sort of hold it in there. And there's a little resin in that bolt when they put it in. And it could be a low-top mine, so all day long in a low-top mine, you're hunched over. You're like this all day, 8 hours a day, and you're putting those bolts in totally unsecured areas where at any moment the rock could fall and crush you flat as a piece of paper. And you do that 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and you're pretty shattered. So you go home and in the daylight, and you have yourself a beer and you lay down. Ooh, what a criminal, huh? They're doing it because they're tired. And even if you're not a roof bolter, if you're in a low top mine or you're doing any kind of hard mining work, and none of it's really easy, you're drained. And to just lie down at your home and have a beer and then have people say all they're doing is lying around when you've never even seen them. Again, it just goes back to the respect issue, to the common decency issue of, why would you say that to a person you don't even know? Kind of makes me question. But again, we're looking at it from the point of view of a person who's never been to West Virginia, who just isn't used to seeing a more rural life, possibly. They're not used to how coal miners work. Long day at work, you're going to go blow off some steam, typically. So you go to a bar and have a few thousand beers, or not. Or you just want to be with your family, or you just want to lie down and relax because you're tired. That's not really a big leap. I don't think there's any big mystery there. Another thing is that there are a lot of perceptions about West Virginians out there that I think are rather unflattering. And it would be ironic if some folks listen to West Virginians' perceptions of them, because I can assure you they're just as flattering as the ones you have. One of my favorites, of course, is that people are slow. People don't listen to everything. Again, you're relying on total strangers to help you. So to walk in there with the assumption that they're a dullard, kind of not really polite, and that gets picked up on pretty fast. When somebody talks to you like you're not all there, gee, that's so flattering. And can you imagine that a person is just not going to be aching to help you when you're being condescending to them? Comes off a little negative. So again, when you walk into someone's home or on their property, and you start taking pictures, or you just walk in and start talking to a person and they may not respond the way you're used to people responding to you, and you begin talking down to them, that's not going to go over very big. It's horribly impolite, especially when you find out the reason that person is so tired is because they've literally been risking their lives for about 8 to 10 hours a day, and they're shattered physically. They don't have the energy to sit upright and look energetic because they're spent. So hence the expression you often heard when a person was worked out. In the city, when a person is worked out or is worked out, they're getting physically fit. In a coal town, a worked out person is someone who is physically incapable of doing any more labor, possibly for the rest of their lives. That's a thought. It's a very big difference. And the people I've met in the last 10 years from driving probably over 100 coal towns, most of them are the most honest people I've met. They've been the most helpful. I had one guy I'll never forget. He didn't look like he was going to be helpful. Dressed black leather head to toe, comes out in the beat up Camaro, looks like he just got into a fight with a bobcat and barely won. Walks over to me and says, "What did you say?" And I said, "I'd really like to photograph that church." And he got his mom out of their house to move a car so I could drive up a hollow and take pictures of a church. He didn't know me. No idea who I was. And you just can't judge a book by its cover. These are hardworking, honest people who just want a job and they want respect. And if you give it to them, you're going to get the same thing back. So those are the types of people you're going to meet. Now, let's be honest here. Are you going to meet some strange people or maybe some crazy people? Yeah, but you know what? They're pretty much everywhere you go. It won't be just in southern West Virginia that you meet crazy people or people you don't agree with. They're pretty much everywhere in life. And they all don't live in southern West Virginia or northern Minnesota or southern California. They're pretty much everywhere you're going to go. So again, folks, just keep in mind, you're meeting people who are helping you and you're going into a different culture. I firmly believe in coal culture. Culture that exists in coal camps. And one of the mythos of the coal camps you see is every time you open a book, the similar living conditions thing I've already discussed. Coal towns are just as different and large as each person you meet. But most pictures, you see a picture of a miner coming home, he's covered in coal dust, and you'll see some houses, and that's it. They never discuss what language they used, how did they talk to each other. They never discuss how different each town was. They never discuss, the schools, the churches, the post offices. how a post office and church was the center of your town, how that's where you got to meet people, and you respected each other when you met each other because later on you learned to like a person. And you had to respect a person because if you don't know what you're doing and you're in a coal mine, you're going to die. And that brings the respect out pretty fast. Later on, you might even like the person. But first things first, you respect them because they're going to keep you alive. That's a big difference. At least to a big amount of behaviors. So keep that in mind for those of you who are visiting your coal town for the first time. And if not, hopefully what I've said today will keep an open mind for you. Or help others along that you meet who are obviously going to a coal town for the first time. Thank you, and have a good evening. There will be more tips just later on. Thank you.